Hello, my beautiful listeners. Welcome back to The Gentle Voice. I am Yin Yin, and I am so grateful that you're here with me today. Now, if you're listening because your heart is heavy or because someone walked away from you, this episode was especially made for you. I want you to stay with me all the way through the end, though, because by the end of this episode, you'll not only have a better understanding of rejection, but also walk away with real research-backed steps to start your healing journey and to take your power back. Now let's start with the truth that really stings, and that's simply rejection hurts, not just emotionally, but it affects us psychologically, physically, and even neurologically. Now, research from Dr. Guy Winch, a licensed psychologist and author of Emotional First Aid, shows that rejection activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. Now, when I read this, I was completely blown away, but the more I read, the more it made complete sense. I mean, that's why heartbreak doesn't just feel like sadness. It can feel like a literal ache, like in your chest or in your stomach. So our brain interprets this as real harm. So if you've been wondering why this feels unbearable, please know that you're not being overly dramatic or weak. You're having a natural reaction to this experience. It's human. It's normal to have this kind of reaction to something like this. But here's what I want you to hold on to. Rejection doesn't define your worth. The person that walked away from you is not the judge of your value. In fact, most of the time, people don't reject you. They reject what they're not ready for. They reject the mirror you held up to them, the stability, emotional maturity, or vulnerability that they simply weren't capable of matching. And while that may not take away the sting or the pain right now, understanding this can keep you from internalizing their limitations as your shortcomings. Psychologist Dr. Lisa Firestone, who has written extensively about attachment and self-worth, explains that rejection often taps into what she calls the critical inner voice, that harsh, self-doubting narrative we carry from early life experiences. So it may sound like, maybe I just wasn't enough, or if I were better, then they would have stayed. But those voices are complete liars. That's what some people call ego. And I know I've mentioned this in a couple of my earlier episodes. But healing starts when we learn to separate those internalized fears from the actual truth. So I want you to really sit with this. Their decision to leave doesn't make you less worthy of love, loyalty, or partnership. It simply means they weren't ready for the version of love you were offering. Licensed marriage and family therapist Vienna Farion, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. If I'm not, I do apologize. But she often talks about how rejection can feel like abandonment, especially for those of us who grew up without emotional safety. And that's something I personally can relate to. Rejection for me never felt like, just dating stuff. I was aware that it triggered childhood wounds, memories of, being left out or hearing that my emotions were too much or too big or, being made to feel like I had to earn love. And when someone I care for walks away, it feels like I'm right back there. I get like those images of the past and it's like, I'm wanting to try and prove that I'm lovable. But what I've learned is that the pain of rejection is often not about that person. It's about the story we started telling ourselves long before them. So let's talk about how you can begin to move forward. So psychologists say that the healing process begins when we reconnect with our sense of self outside of the rejection. Dr. Brené Brown talks about the importance of practicing self-compassion during emotional pain. And she encourages us to treat ourselves the way we would treat like a dear friend. So instead of saying, you know what, I should have known better, or my gosh, what's wrong with me? Try saying instead, I did the best I could with what I knew, and I deserve kindness right now. It also helps to get clarity, but not from the other person, from yourself. Ask yourself, what did this connection teach me about what I want in a relationship and what I need in a relationship? What did it teach me about my patterns? What kind of love do I not want to accept anymore? These aren't always comfortable questions, but they're powerful. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, I've mentioned him before in my previous videos. He's a psychologist and expert in narcissistic relationships. And he often says that people with high empathy are frequently targeted by emotionally unavailable or manipulative partners, not because we're weak, but because our emotional depth is very attractive. And if you were drawn into a situationship where the person constantly sent you mixed signals, made you feel like, everything was your fault, and then, disappeared without closure, you have to know it says nothing about your worth and everything about their emotional immaturity. So it's not just about healing your heart, it's also about healing your nervous system. Licensed therapist Resmaa Menakem, I hope I'm saying your last name right, I'm terrible with last names apparently, who focuses on trauma in the body, explains that rejection activates the fight or flight response. That's why even days or weeks later, you might still feel on edge or anxious or unable to sleep. They suggest that you try grounding techniques such as deep breathing, journaling, walking barefoot outside, placing your hand on your chest and saying, I'm safe, I'm healing. Healing isn't just mental, it's definitely physical too. Now let's talk about self-worth. One of the most empowering things you can do after being rejected is to pour back into yourself. That means saying yes to the things that bring you joy and peace. But you definitely want to start small. Cook your favorite meal, revisit a creative passion, call someone who makes you laugh. Remember that love and connection don't only exist in a romantic relationship. You are deeply loved in many forms, through friends, chosen family, and even communities like this one. So I just want you to know that. And finally, surrounding yourself with voices that uplift you and don't shame you, whether it's therapy, books, podcasts, or, just a trusted friend, let people remind you of who you are. You don't need to chase closure. That's the last thing you want to do. Chasing is never the answer. But yeah, you don't need to chase closure from the person who hurt you. The closure comes when you decide the story ends here. Like this situation ends here, and you're going to begin your healing journey. So my listeners, if you're hurting right now, I want you to know that you're not alone. I've been there. Many of us have been there. But this chapter is definitely not the end of your story. It's just the turning point. The person who couldn't love you properly was never your final destination. They were just kind of a detour. It was a lesson that just needed to be learned in your path, in your life. And I know that better is coming. Not because you need to be fixed, you definitely don't, but because you are already enough. If this episode spoke to you, or if you felt even a little bit lighter after listening, I'd be so grateful if you gave it a thumbs up and shared it with someone who might need to hear this too. You never know who's quietly going through something, and if you like to keep this gentle space in your life, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next Heart to Heart. Thank you for letting me be a small part of your healing journey. I am so proud of you. This is The Gentle Voice. Take care.